It's been far too long since I last casted a Zerg vs Zerg in StarCraft 2. So what I've got for you today is the best ZVZ series that has been played this year so far. As a matter of fact, this particular match, it's the quarterfinals of the StarCraft 2 World Championships that was played a couple of weeks ago, or I guess at this point a couple of months ago, at IEM Katowice. So spotting right here in the top left-hand corner in game number 1 on the map Dragon Skills. Playing with the blue Zerg drones from Finland, we have Serral. And his opponent in the opposite corner with the red Zerg drones from South Korea. We're looking at RagnaroK's main hatchery. Alrighty, so this particular match, I mean, I've watched it live because I was there at the tournament, but it's an absolute banger. I remember one game in particular with a little bit of early game cheese with a very quick spawning pool. We'll have a look at that game later, but I remember that match in particular because it is very pretty. Anyways, Dragon Skills is going to be map number 1, and both players are opening up with a standard hatchery first. So I'm assuming it's going to be a gas geyser on the back of it as well, and then usually a spawning pool. Alright, because of that, we should have a little bit of time to discuss these players a little bit more. So I think most people are, well familiar with Serral at this point, so let's get started about RagnaroK, right? So RagnaroK is one of those players who's actually incredibly good at the game. But since, well, I guess this is for every sport, but StarCraft 2, it's very top-heavy, not just as far as prize money goes, but also as far as attention goes. RagnaroK oftentimes gets overshadowed by the other Korean Zergs, like, for example, Dark, but also Solar comes to mind. In the past, we had Rogue, who's now doing his mandatory military service, but RagnaroK has always been up there. He's one of the very best Korean Zergs, and maybe he doesn't get as much attention. I was only going to say detention, but that doesn't make any sense. He doesn't get as much attention as he really deserves. He's one of the very best, and when it comes to Zerg vs Zerg in particular, he's always looked very, very strong. Leading up to this particular series, he took down Neep, he took down Dark, he took down Kjör, and he even beat Oliveira, who ended up winning the entire tournament, of course. Oliveira, the current StarCraft 2 world champion, he ended up beating him 2-0 at IEM Katowice. So RagnaroK certainly was on point. Now, Serral, just on the off chance you're unfamiliar, I mean, I don't get to cast nearly as many of his games as I would like to, but he's considered by many players out there, myself included, the greatest StarCraft 2 player of all time. Serral, while maybe not as strong as Zerg vs Zerg, and I'll get to that in just a moment, his Zerg vs Protoss and his Zerg vs Terran look absolutely unstoppable. Oftentimes in tournaments, it's not weird for Serral to have upwards of like 90% win rate in both of those matchups, which is just absurd. However, the one matchup that has historically always held him back, it's Zerg vs Zerg. So this was actually brought up at IEM Katowice, and I thought this was kind of interesting, so since we have a relatively tame early game here, I can talk about this for just a moment. But Serral mentioned that apparently he doesn't get to practice a whole lot of Zerg vs Zerg, since this matchup is incredibly explosive, right? Especially with Banelings, right? We'll literally see units explode here momentarily, apparently. But especially with the early game, you can accidentally lose. Because of that, you can't really practice when you have a lot of ping. So say you want to practice with someone on a Korean server and you're Serral, right? You play from Finland and you want to play on Korea. You're gonna automatically play with like 300 ping or maybe 250 ping. And that's honestly a little bit too much for Zerg vs Zerg practice. These games obviously were played in Poland, so they can actually, you know, play with one another. But when it comes to actually practicing the game, you can only practice with a handful of players. Now, we have a little bit of aggression coming up, so I'll get back to this in just a moment. The Serral did make a large round of links. This is designed to try and kill the third base right here of RagnaroK. A couple of Banelings are finishing up as well. A couple of Banelings here also finishing up for Rag, who is going to lose one of his queens, but at the very least the queens, okay, they ended up, well, soaking up quite a bit of damage, and it's buying a lot of time to now get reinforcing Zerglings out here as well. So RagnaroK should be able to keep that third base alive relatively easily, but Serral is still feeling a little bit feisty. This is honestly a little uncharacteristic. Usually Serral likes to play that very passive style, the very laid-back approach, but right now, he is the one getting aggressive. Ooh. Could have certainly done a lot more damage right there to the drones, as Serral right now is trying to pick off those workers one at a time. Additional Banelings also do show up, and this is really starting to hurt RagnaroK quite a bit. Keep in mind, Serral made a large round of drones when he first got across the map, so right now he is leading this game quite nicely. Okay, do I have time to go back to my story? Maybe I don't. Maybe I need to wait until the next game. Well, both players are droning again, so I think I'm good. Okay, so when you think about it, right? Who exactly can Serral practice Zerg vs Zerg with? There's really only 3 names. There's really only 3 names on a European server that are at Serral's level, or at least, you know, at Serral's practice level, I suppose. Raynor, first and foremost. So Raynor, second best Zerg player from Europe. He usually wins in the ZVZ matchup against Serral. So, you know, he doesn't really want to practice that particular matchup because he's only really going to help out, you know, one of his main competitors. It doesn't make any sense. And apparently both Elaser and Lambo also don't really want to practice Zerg versus Zerg as often as Serral would like to. So, yeah, it's an interesting debate. If you can't practice the matchup, how in the world do you get better at it when realistically you can only practice against like 3 opponents? Anyways, very nice Baneling control right here from Serral. Very good micro here in general as well, as he's now following this up with a lot of roaches. Alright, he's following this up with a lot of roaches, +1 carapace on the back of this too, and this attack is going to hit like a truck. The only thing that Serral doesn't have going for him, and that is by design, is any tech. He has decided to skip the lair. So no lair, that means no roach speed, no spire or anything along those lines. He is planning to win the game with the +1 carapace push. This is one of the classic attacks in the Zerg versus Zerg matchup, since Lings, Banes, Roaches, and Ravagers, all of it benefits from that carapace upgrade. This is a very powerful timing. However, RagnaroK does have a lair. Well, I actually just cancelled it. Okay, he just decided to cancel it because he recognizes that he needs the maximum amount of units that he can. That honestly, I mean, it allows him probably to defend this a little bit more comfortably, but it doesn't really give him an out, right? He needs to really smash this attack. He's trying to buy as much time as possible. Now, nice little bit of Baneling control here once again. +1 carapace, however, has kicked in. You can see those Zerglings that do survive right now with 1 HP in mind. Okay, here's the Roach aggression on the other side. Those Lings will be forced to come across. We did see the +1 missile upgrade for RagnaroK as well, but the question is, can Serral break through this right now? The +1 carapace and the +1 armor, they do cancel each other out, at least when it comes to the Roach battles. The Zergling aggression still, well, here from RagnaroK, forcing a lot of those defensive Zerglings here for Serral. And honestly, that was incredibly well done right there by Rag. I actually expected he was going to die to that straight-up attack, but not quite the case. Both players going back to droning. Lair does start up right here for Serral, so he's going to be able to get at least a decent amount of tech here eventually, but this is really starting to hurt quite a bit. What seemed like a relatively straightforward game from Serral is now turning into a solid macro game right here for Rag. Okay. Impressive hold right there. All he really needs to do right now is blow up a bunch of drones. If you can kill half a mineral line, yeah, that's not bad at all. Well, that was 4 drones, maybe not quite half a mineral line. Zerglings, and at the same time, also trying to break into RagnaroK's natural, but so far, that is not happening. So you can see that RagnaroK, I think a lot of you, when you click on this video, right, you see, okay, it's RagnaroK versus Serral. I think a lot of people will automatically lean towards Serral, just because Serral, well, he's got like $1.2 million or whatever in tournament earnings over the years. RagnaroK is not even remotely close to that, but RagnaroK certainly can hold himself, and I mean, like I mentioned, he already beat Dark earlier on in this particular tournament. He is showing us that he is more than capable of going toe-to-toe with the best. Alright, so, now RagnaroK is the one who's aggressive. He still does not have his lair done. He decided to restart it, however. Now Serral is waiting here on the low ground, going for a couple Ravagers, going for his Glial Reconstitution, that's the Roach speed upgrade. But is there enough? Concave right here, heavily in favor, of course, of the finisher. Zerglings coming around the back as well. That's that large clump that was built earlier on. Now those Ravagers, yeah, they're gonna be able to land Biles in the middle of those Roach clumps, and that is a brilliant engagement right there from Serral, and that now allows him to win game number 1. Next up, we find ourselves on Royal Blood. Okay. Now, I didn't really talk about the early games very much in the previous one. And honestly, since it's been a while since I casted a Zerg versus Zerg on the channel, I'm well familiar with the matchup, but let's discuss the early game for just a moment, okay? So, when you first start playing StarCraft 2, and say, for example, you decide to pick Zerg on the ladder, right? Say you play a 1 versus 1 and you pick Zerg on the ladder. I will probably guess that 9 times out of 10, if not more, your opponent, if not yourself, right, is gonna commit to early game aggression. Zerg versus Zerg, like I said, it's one of the most explosive matchups in the entire game, and it's incredibly easy to lose. Now, in general, that's the case in StarCraft 2. You can very easily lose if you make a little mistake, but since all of the units that Zerg has available in the early game have like 5 health, but all deal like 50 damage, it's very difficult to stay alive. Add on top of that the movement speed upgrades, like for example for Zerglings, and the amount of, micro mistakes that you can make, it's basically zero. You can't really mess up. Now, the higher you climb, and obviously this is basically the highest level of StarCraft 2, the higher you climb, the less frequent cheese becomes, because the opponent is good enough at microing their early game units to actually stay alive. And like I said, we'll have we'll have some cheese later on in this series as well. Anyways, because of that, usually players do open up with a hatchery first, into a gas geyser, and then eventually into a spawning pool. But this is obviously a little bit risky if you are relatively new to StarCraft 2, and I honestly feel like you should probably not be doing this at earliest until like Diamond League, but preferably even higher than that. It's just too easy to accidentally lose the game. Oftentimes, actually, it may be easier to be the aggressor. So, you know, going for the early game cheese will probably give you the highest win-loss ratio, or the best win-loss ratio, but yeah, this level of play, we do see quite a few macro openers. Now, one of the ways that these Zerg players manage to stay alive is with very, very specific Overlord scouts. So notice right here, Serral has this first Overlord on the other side of the map. Now he has seen the timing right there of his opponent's hatchery. The same can be said on the other side of the map as well. But say, for example, right, RagnaroK sees Zerglings running past his Overlord at 1 minute and 19 seconds, right? I'm just saying an arbitrary number. But say he sees Lings running at 1 minute and 19 seconds. He will know precisely what build order the opponent has gone for just off of that scout alone. And obviously, map sizes in StarCraft 2, they differ, right? It's a couple seconds here and there, but you need to be able to tell what sort of build your opponent has decided to go for. And knowing those timings, I mean, you have to study the game. It's very easy, again, to make an accidental slip up in the early game. Because of that, you have to practice and you have to know exactly what's going on, and what you're playing against is incredibly important to scout. Anyways, since those pylons, since those supply depots do fly, you can get a lot of vision. So both players have already been positioning those overlords in tactical locations. Notice right here, Serral trying his very best. There's a little bit of darkness over there where Zerglings could sneak by, but there's a little bit of an overlord meta game as well, where both players try to be as well specific with their overlord placement as possible without making it too obvious for them to get sniped. So having overlords on those attack paths, it allows you to react in time, right? So you get a little bit of intel when your opponent decides to go across the map. Zerglings, however, are being made defensively usually. So we have a couple of banelings over here hiding behind the baneling nest. Fair enough. But yeah, they are going to try their very best to make it impossible here for the opponent to deal damage in the earlier stages of the game. I mean, you can see both players really just want to be making those drones, because ultimately the guy with more drones will end up winning, usually. But yeah, if you only make drones early on, obviously you will not have enough army. Now, tech-wise, usually after Ling Bane phase, we will have a Roach Ravager phase. So Roaches and Ravagers are the most common follow-up. +1 missile here is a big indicator that RagnaroK wants to play a slightly longer game at the very least. Mostly because the Zerglings, they do not obviously benefit from the +1 missile upgrade. It's only the Roaches and then eventually the Ravagers and maybe Hydras that come after that. When you get to the lair, however, when you get to lair tech, which both players should be going for here momentarily, Serral once again actually going Carapace. So that is interesting. The Carapace upgrade is a big indicator you actually don't want to go for a lair, but instead you want to go for an attack that Serral went for in the previous game. But usually once you get the lair tech, you will go into either Roach Speed, but you can also go into a Nidus Network, you can go into a Spire, and obviously if you get a Spire, you can go into Mutas. If the opponent has Roaches and Ravagers out, oftentimes Mutas can get countered. Just because, well, the Spire takes forever to build and Roaches can actually counter Mutas even though they're flying units. It becomes a very complex matchup where speed is still one of the main criteria, right? Like one of the main characteristics of the matchup, because everything just moves around so dang quick. So even though strategically rather this game is maybe not super difficult to play, Zerg versus Zerg, because it's not like it's incredibly layered, right? Unlike some of the other matchups, it's still one of the absolute hardest matchups to play properly because it's so easy to just accidentally die. Alright, anyways, so what exactly do we have? We do have the Spire coming up right now for RagnaroK. We do have Roach Speed coming up for RagnaroK. Serral still has not gone for a lair. So he's been hiding Roaches here in the back. We've seen continuous Zergling scouts. One cheeky little move that RagnaroK, or that Serral made, is that he's transferred drones towards the third base. So look at the amount of info that RagnaroK actually has. He's scouting right here. Okay, my opponent has practically a full mineral line over there at the third, but that is because Serral purposefully only has 8 drones right over here in the natural. Now suddenly he's gonna appear with the +1 carapace finishing up. RagnaroK will see this gigantic army. The question is he gonna be able to actually get enough units out to defend in the meantime at home? This is a very pivotal attack that's coming up right now for Serral. Okay, nice little Zergling counterattack. He's been trying for a while, and eventually he does break in, but reinforcing units will probably get rid of that. Anyways, Spire, did it get cancelled? Yes, he did decide to cancel the Spire, much like the Lair in the previous game. He just wants to get a big enough army out. At this point, army value-wise, heavily in favor right here of Serral, who's trying to bust through this as well with a bunch of Banelings. Well, a few of the Banelings are thinking about going for the drones instead, and I don't absolutely hate that choice. Blowing up the workers will allow this a little bit more longevity. Spinecrawlers right now, though, are finishing up right here as well for the South Korean Zerg. Even drones are pulled away from their posts as well to try and just soak up as much damage as possible. Defender's advantage, something I haven't really discussed yet, but it is also massive in this matchup just because of the fact that units spawn closer to your hatcheries, obviously. Allow you to reinforce these fights a little bit quicker, and Serral does get deflected. By the skin of his teeth, RagnaroK stays alive, but that is exactly where you want to be. He decides to restart the Spire. Now that is an interesting one. He's going into +2 missile as well, okay? So that is going to allow RagnaroK to continuously upgrade his units and to get more and more powerful Roaches and Ravagers out. Okay, so when it comes to Spire play, a couple different lines of thought. First off, you go mass Muta, and then usually supported with Lings and Banes. Or you make one group of Mutas, you kill all of your opponent's Overlords, you force those Roaches of your opponent to stay at home, you go for like a transition, right, as you are being pushed with Mutas to, for example, Hydras, and then as RagnaroK, well, he could make a round of Mutas, he could go straight back into that Roach production as well. You really only usually see enough Mutas for map control, but anyways, once again, we have that wraparound. Corrosive Balls, hello, no Corrosive Balls this time around. I think there was a chance for Serral to do a lot of damage. Interesting attack right here from RagnaroK, though. Well, you can see he's mostly saving up his gas count. Serral could pick up on this as well. He doesn't know about the Spire at this point, but he could pick up on this as well just because he hasn't seen any Ravagers from the opponent, and he has seen gases from the opponent. So where exactly is all of that being spent? Well, now the Spire, it's up in the main base. We see 5 Mutas coming up. I think judging by the fact that... Oh, he cancelled the +2. Wow, okay, so RagnaroK is a fan of canceling stuff today. I did not realize that when I first watched this series when it was being played live. Okay, he's been canceling upgrades and structures and everything, left, right, and center. That actually I don't like all too much. I think he should have kept that +1, or that the +2 missile here. That probably would have played out a little bit better. Anyways, now the Mutas are out. And look at the vision right here of Serral, currently on the minimap, right? It's already starting to diminish, but very soon... Serral won't really know too much. Now, even though he doesn't have any units that can shoot up other than those queens, he's still gonna test the waters on the other side of the map. Obviously, Serral did commit to the +1 carapace earlier, and those Mutas, they're mostly just gonna tickle away at those Roaches and Ravagers. They will obviously kill them over time, but Serral decides to buy some time right now. Yeah, he goes into the Hydralisk Den. I like that choice quite a bit. But is there enough right now for Serral to break through this? Okay, once again, that Spinecrawler being very helpful, taking up a lot of hits. There's another Spinecrawler over here in the back, mostly dealt to, or meant here to deal with counterattacks, but Serral trying to Corrosive Bow a couple of those cocoons that are still coming up. This position right here for RagnaroK, really not ideal, but those Mutas are still tickling away, right? They're not dealing a ton of damage, but they will eventually clean all of this up. RagnaroK reinforcing this with as many Roaches as he can. Okay, he might need to run the drones here in just a moment. I wouldn't mind seeing them moving on over, but you can see how close these guys are actually matched. Serral now transitioning towards Hydralisks, okay. One thing you want to pay attention to in a Zerg versus Zerg is the amount of workers here at the bottom of the screen. So it's 57 versus 51 right now. Doesn't sound like a big difference, but it basically means that RagnaroK, as time goes by, is getting like 15% more income every minute. And that does add up very quickly. Okay, so he holds. Now Hydras, however, are coming out. Hydras are amazing, but they also need something to tank in front of them. So Hydras have 90 HP, a Roach is 145 plus more armor. So yeah, Hydras alone, usually not a very good option. Plus, on top of that, if you go mass Hydra, they can get blown up by Banelings. Banelings are phenomenal against Hydras. Anyways, at this point, yeah, Serral is gonna be able to deflect those Mutalisks. But the problem is, he doesn't know, because he's gonna, well, I mean, he sees at least right now. That actually is an amazing scout right there. I was gonna say, Serral doesn't know if the opponent is doubling down on Mutas. He just scouted the opponent's Spire, and it actually does move around a little bit. It wiggles whenever the +1 upgrade, for example, is being researched. So Serral probably now realizes that he's not playing against somebody who's going mass Muta. But that can be a difficult scout. That can be a very difficult tell, right? You never know if your opponent is gonna go 30 Mutas, or if they're gonna go just, well, 8 Mutas in this case, and then maximum Roach production once again. Turns out it's the second option this time. So Serral only just enough Hydras right here to push back those Mutas. And yeah, I think he should be okay. He's slowly making that transition. Now, when it comes to the ultimate unit composition for this particular matchup, it's not Roaches and Ravagers, it's not Roaches and Mutas, it's not Hydras, it's not Roach Hydra. Usually Hydra Lurker Viper kills everything. But you can't really go straight into Hydra Lurker Viper, because, well, yeah, then you just lose to the other timing attacks that the opponent is likely going for. So, if the game goes to distance, usually with like 8 gas play, you can start thinking about it, but at this point, definitely not the case just yet. RagnaroK once again coming in, trying to get as much surface area as possible. He is biting some of his own units. Good control right there by Serral, once again, stepping out of those battles to the best of his abilities. Stepping back over there up north as well. Worker count though, that's still in favor right here of RagnaroK, but Serral has enough army to push this back. Hydras have a lot more damage per second than Roaches do. So they're not gonna, yeah, they're not gonna be able to easily win these sort of battles. Upgrades are still massive, but because he decided to cancel that +2 carapace, or sorry, the +2 missile earlier, yeah, he's allowed Serral to catch up in that department. I don't think he really needed to do that, to be honest, but okay. So now suddenly Serral is once again on the offensive. Muta's still on the other side of the map trying to be obnoxious. Surface area is massive though, so yeah, just biling in between this choke point. Nicely done right there by RagnaroK. Serral right now trying to force the opponent to back off. He wants to get into a better position. So you want to essentially set up as big an arc as possible. The bigger the arc on your units, the better it becomes, right? The concave will pretty much always beat the convex. Just because the units will fire more frequently. And Serral right now trying to set up the biggest concave that you can. Basically going for a circle. I guess, you know, if you extend the concave long enough, at some point it becomes... Anyways, doesn't really matter. No geometry lesson this time around. Nice position right here, though, for RagnaroK, right? Keep in mind that high ground is still very helpful. When you lose vision here as Serral, it becomes a very difficult game to play. And RagnaroK, indeed, wins game number 2. Okay. Game 3, we find ourselves on Gresvin. I always wonder if I should be talking about strategy that in depth. Is it too much? Do I just shout at the pretty pictures instead? I'm actually very interested in hearing your thoughts. Let me know down below in the comment section of this video, because oftentimes I kind of feel like I don't talk about the game as much as I probably should, even though I'm talking about the matchup and I'm trying to explain the thoughts and the strategies that the players are going for. I really, really like Zerg vs. Zerg. I know that usually the ZVZ videos I upload on the channel, they do relatively poorly. At least, you know, viewer-wise, I always notice there is a little bit of a dip whenever I cast usually any of the mirror matchups, but especially Zerg vs. Zerg. But I'm passionate about this matchup, man. I wanna try and explain what's going on, but maybe sometimes I talk a little too much strategy and I talk a little bit too little about the game. Anyhow, next up we find ourselves on Gresvin, and once again, both players decide to go for a hatchery first. And that usually means, yep, we can see the beautiful arc right here. The split on the workers. That means that we're going to be seeing a gas geyser on the back of it at 18 supply. And then a spawning pool as well. So 16 hatch, 18 gas, 17 supply spawning pool is the go-to in this particular matchup. And really in all of the Zerg matchups. But, you know, a little asterisk right next to it. You want to make sure that you can actually defend against whatever the opponent is throwing at you. Okay. Now, maps are obviously huge as well in this matchup. Even though units are fast, a couple additional seconds in the early game really does make a big difference. So, say for example, you want to go for an early game cheese. Say you want to go for like a 13-12, so a 13 supply gas geyser straight into a spawning pool, very quick link speed. On a map like Altitude, you're just simply gonna be sending your units across for like an additional 3, 4, 5 seconds. And that may just be enough for your opponent to get an additional queen out. Gresven is probably the most standard map that we have in the current map pool of StarCraft 2, so usually this is a pretty good baseline map where everything is relatively average. So yeah, this is probably not going to be a super cheesy map, but we've got something, okay? We've got something coming up very soon. Anyhow, queens are coming up on both sides of the map. Double queen, very helpful. Serral pulling 1 drone out of gas, and we saw the same thing already on the other side of the map as well. This is a very small move, but again, mostly just done to make sure that you play an optimal game. Like Cersei Lannister already said, in the game of drones, you win or you die. There is no middle ground. You want to try and maximize the amount of mineral income that you get, while still being able to go for a reasonably timed bailing nest. So, 1 drone is pulled out of gas to squeeze out an additional drone to make sure that the hatchery at the third goes up ever so slightly quicker, but to still have a reasonably timed bailing nest over here at the front too, just to make sure that you don't lose. He can get in if he wants to, but he's not going to. Yeah, just to make sure that you can make bailings when you absolutely need them. Usually the timing of the Evo chamber is right around the time that the bailing nest finishes. Although recently a lot of players have been messing around with that a little bit. Elaser, for example, seems to be convinced that Evo Chamber upgrades are not worth it in the early game. So Elaser actually has found a lot of success in the Zerg versus Zerg matchup over the last year or so, purposefully delaying his Evo Chamber upgrades and prioritizing units instead. Anyhow, there's RagnaroK, so this is a very normal build from him, going into the Evo Chamber, but Serral, yeah, not going for his here. So instead he is keeping that drone that turns into the Evo Chamber alive for a little bit longer. You can see this reflected right now in the work account. It's slight, it's minimal. Instead he decides to go, okay, so he allows that drone to go for a couple additional trips, and then it turns into the Evo Chamber, and then a second second structure here as well in that Roach Warren, then eventually a gas too. RagnaroK gets a perfect scout in the main base. He wants to know, is this a super quick lair? It would be uncommon, it would be unorthodox, but at least knowing is better than not knowing. Lair does start up for RagnaroK right now as he sees that his opponent is playing a normal game, and he's now also going for his Roach Warren. So, both players opting for the +1 missile upgrade, as expected on Gresven. We don't usually see a whole lot of spiciness, this is usually the macro map, so... Both players opting to go for what is considered to be, well, the standard in this particular matchup, with very small deviations. In the past, it was common as well, while the lair was coming up, to go for the Pneumatized Carapace upgrade, so that's the Overlord speed. You may have already seen both players trying to bow down the opponent's Overlords. So what you can do with Overlord speed is set up a patrol command for each of these OVs, so it becomes very difficult to actually bow them down. We don't really see that all too often anymore these days. We don't really see a lot of Zerg versus Zerg in general, to be honest, at this level. Not as common anyways as it once upon a time was. A little bit of a Baneling Zergling skirmish here in the middle of the map. Both players end up losing a little bit. Nothing all too crazy. Now that roaches are out though, they should be able to tank most of that damage. Okay, Serral decided to go for a gas geyser but then cancelled it. Maybe he wanted to go for Spire himself. Not the case. So there's the Pneumatized Carapace, that is the Overlord speed. Once again though, RagnaroK going for a Spire on his end of the map. Generally the Koreans seem to be very fond of playing Mutas. The non-Koreans do play it as well, but not as commonly. They usually seem to prefer the Roach Ravager Wars. I personally like Mutas a lot, but, you know, I'm a bit of a gambler, I guess. It can be tricky, because this is a 200 mineral, 200 gas structure. Serral is known for his amazing scouting. So, yeah, he sees the Spire right there, and this is going to allow him a little bit of time to defend. But this is also where I feel like Serral... And I don't really want to criticize him, right? Because he knows the game significantly better than me, but... This is also always where I feel like Serral is not very comfortable. When he's playing that defensive Roach Hydra style against somebody who's going Roach Muta... I don't know. I always kind of feel like he's not having a great time. Anyhow, Overlord turned into an Overseer, going into the opponent's base. Glial Reconstitution already done on the side of RagnaroK. Serral attempting a push right now, but honestly he can't. I mean, he can test the waters, of course, right? So this is actually quite nice for him. He forced out loads of roaches out of RagnaroK, which now means that RagnaroK can't go for as many mutas, because he's only got a little bit of gas. Okay. Hydra then coming up. So this is that point in the game, right? Where Serral is going to be forced to play defensively, and RagnaroK is essentially going to be able to do whatever he likes. Couple options here for RagnaroK. Like I said, you can go mass muta, you can go mass roach, you can even go straight into hydras and lurkers. You could go into ultras if you want to, you know. Usually Serral is gonna leave you alone, but I mean, he decides to push straight onto the high ground. He's looking at that roach army right here in blue. Normally that is not the textbook approach right there from RagnaroK. Normally you don't shove your army in the middle of yeah, a group of roaches like that, but RagnaroK making the executive decision to, that was honestly beautiful, to make that call. He looked at the army here of the opponent, he realized, yo, you are playing a creative little game, my man. I'm deciding just to go for a big push. And these sort of traits are really quite nice for him, because he's forcing out a lot of roaches now on the side of Serral, while making a bunch of mutas himself. And as soon as the mutas are on the other side of the map, is Serral really going to decide to go for a counterattack right now? When, you know, mutas are already here, yeah, can you really make that call? Well, maybe you can make that call, because the mutas decide to not go after the army and instead go after the drones. Okay, so this is going to be a lot of damage right here, dealt by the South Korean Zerg. Lovely move. These mutas are probably going to have to come back home, though, because those roaches in blue need to be deflected. He's been making units here himself for a little while already as well, so RagnaroK does have defensive roaches out. Going to start target firing down some of these bad boys as well, aiming for the low HP ones, and eventually quite a few of these will find their death, while killing 8 drones on the other side. Excellent, excellent game right here by RagnaroK. The more hydras he can force out, the better this becomes. Lovely play. Okay. Now he's showing up again with roaches. Is there enough? Well, no high ground vision right here, so that group of roaches here in blue, they managed to get a couple additional shots off, but Serral's bleeding out hydralisks. He's bleeding out a lot of units here for essentially free, and over time, yeah, it's really added up. Look at the resources lost right now on both sides of the map. Serral already not with an economical advantage. Sure, he's got the 4th hatchery done right now, but this is definitely not amazing for him. Now he's also going to end up losing a bunch of OVs. They are patrolling back and forth, but I think you guys should be patrolling at, well, the main base. Okay. Look at the vision right here of Serral. He sees nothing. He doesn't know where to expect these units. Maybe he sees a glimpse right there of a bunch of mutas. Yeah, they're gonna head on over into the main base, but where exactly is that ground army of RagnaroK going to appear next? Okay. Changeling over there, always nice. He does see the army coming in right now, so that's good, but RagnaroK is maxed out. Serral only at 145 supply. All of those small moves, they have led to a very large advantage. And RagnaroK is looking absolutely dominant here, trying his best to force his opponent out of the game. Again, taking a fight that is usually considered questionable, but with the way that this game has been going, he knows he's got more stuff. And therefore, we're going to match point. Now this is one of the most beautiful games of StarCraft 2 that I've seen this year. This is the StarCraft 2 World Championships quarterfinals. Maru, I believe, is waiting in the next round. RagnaroK decides to put it all on the line with a 12 pool. So he realizes, okay, I'm going up against Serral. This guy, he's considered to be the GOAT. But Zerg versus Zerg seems to be the bane of his existence. Or the baneling of his existence. Ha! He decides to just go for the most aggressive build you can go for, as he decides to build a spawning pool at the earliest possible time. In the meanwhile, on the other side of the map, Serral decides to go for a hatchery first. So Serral goes for a hatch, into a gas geyser, into a spawning pool, as we have seen many times before already. This is considered to be a build order loss. This is as close to a build order loss as you can get, especially if RagnaroK decides to pull the boys. Which, if I'm not mistaken, he does. So usually what you do is you go for about 10 Zerglings or so, you just make as many links as you can, and you then decide to pull the boys. You leave a few drones behind, just enough to continuously be able to make Zerglings. As larvae spawn, you want to make sure you get those going. A couple drones are going to be leading the pack as well. These bad boys are charged with turning into spine crawlers on the opponent's creep. Links are out, and only 2 drones remain in the main base to try and just continuously, well, build those links. Serral does not know. As a matter of fact, RagnaroK is choosing a very creative route towards the other side of the map. This is coming at the cost of a couple seconds. But Serral does not know, as he's gone for a hatchery into a spawning pool and a gas geyser and all that super late. Now he sees what he's playing against, but Serral definitely does not have a lot of time anymore. Now Serral did build his spawning pool in a very curious position. That looks funny, but it's intentional, right? You want to build this so you can make a wall. 3 spine crawlers are right now building in a row right next to each other, forcing those drones to go all the way up there, rather than hugging themselves against the surface area of the spawning pool. Serral now decides to cancel all of those Evo chambers as he is stacking up the drones. Okay, gets a couple Zerglings. Lovely work right there. Zerglings right now are spawning from the main base as well, but those spine crawlers, they are still building. Hatchery on the low ground is done. 2 queens are coming up out of those hatcheries as well, and as the spine crawlers get denied here, Serral is pushing back one of the most aggressive openers you can go for in just an incredible display of skill. This is... If you've ever tried this, okay, I'm just gonna go back again. I'm just gonna go back and I'm gonna watch this from Serral's point of view. I haven't done that yet. This is one of the absolute hardest things to do. So this is really the first time that Serral sees this, right? So we're gonna be switching on over to his vision. This is his overlord right now that's selected. Okay. So, first things first, we pull the drones out of gas. Those are the drones that apparently turn into evolution chambers. That spine crawler needs to be... So, what you're trying to do here is RagnaroK, right? RagnaroK wants to build those spine crawlers as close to the spawning pool as possible to reduce the service area if, well, for example, lings and drones from the opponent try to kill the spines. You can't cancel a spawning pool for obvious reasons, because then you can't make lings, you can't make queens, you can't make anything. So that spawning pool is a given. So going for those couple Evo chambers here is really quite clever. So right now, waiting, buying time, trying to mine as much as possible, and now he cancels those Evo chambers. RagnaroK trying to get a surround right there, so Serral decides to pull the boys right around the time as those lings were about to be surrounded as they popped out of the cocoons. Couple of drones there. One Zergling apparently tasked with sniping down as much of this as possible. As Serral is trying his best to make sure that he does not lose any more drones than he absolutely needs to. Obviously, this is an all-in. There's only 2 workers on the other side of the map, so no real way for RagnaroK to transition. And Serral actually stays alive with, like, what? 14 drones? 14 drones versus 2. Altitude decides who will be facing off against Maru in the semifinals of the StarCraft 2 World Championships. Both players decide to go for a hatchery into a gas geyser, and then eventually a spawning pool as well. Once again, the standard opener. Like I said, Altitude, it is an absolutely massive map. The rush distance from natural to natural is just too big, and, well, if RagnaroK wanted to go for some more cheese, after that previous game, I don't think he would feel comfortable doing so, and I don't think that Serral would feel comfortable doing something aggressive on a map like this either. Now, this particular map rather, is probably the most controversial one of the entire tournament. And you'll, by the end of it, you'll see why. I'm actually interested in hearing your thoughts on it down below in the comment section. I was originally gonna make a video about this much sooner. I don't know why I haven't yet, but anyways. Well, we're doing it now. We're doing it now. This is considered to be, yeah, a little bit of a controversial one. So both players opening up with a normal macro build. Overlords are going around as well. Serral's gonna see, okay, there's creep. Judging by how far that creep has spread, this can only be a hatchery first. Therefore, I am safe to do whatever I like. Couple of links here run by the first Overlord too. Small deviation as Serral decides to go for a second group of Zerglings as well, whereas RagnaroK is opting for 1 additional drone. Okay, another small deviation is that RagnaroK is going for the triangular third base, whereas Serral is expanding horizontally. But all things considered, these are incredibly minor. Still, you have to always react to a couple of lings nibbling away at your third base. So 1 queen is being sent from the natural. Okay, Brenda shows herself right now as she starts shooting at the Overlord. But until link speed is done, usually the queens are relatively safe. No, she's gonna be going back, lay down a creep tumor, then start injecting the third base. Large group of Zerglings right now on the production tab right here for Serral, so he is ready to go for some aggression on the other side. At the same time, we also have a couple of Zerglings here hiding on the right side of the map. RagnaroK wants to see what's going on inside of that base of the blue player. So he runs them in right now, and you will see a lot of Zerglings. A lot of Zerglings. Okay, the dancing has to be on point. Already we had a little bit of Zergling skirmishing right there on the left side of the map. The low HP units do get morphed into Banes. They will spawn with full HP. Serral already made a couple of Banelings right down the right side as well. He's now morphing in more right in the face of the opponent. Going for some cheeky early game harassment. Snipes the opponent's third queen. Not bad at all. One of the Banelings over there goes down. Excellent control right here by the finisher. He wants to get one more queen, but a lot of reinforcing Zerglings here for RagnaroK are available. Yeah, that link is also not going to happen, but Serral still, yeah, feels feisty. He feels like he can still continuously fight this. This is mostly just, though, to put on a little bit more pressure. Both players are eventually going to return right here to droning, as even though RagnaroK is, well, being pushed quite aggressively, he realizes, okay, it's time for me to add on some drones once again, as he is now the one who goes for the +1 carapace push. Sniping that queen, though, is really nice. You're forced to remake the queen here as RagnaroK, because otherwise you just don't have enough production. And it really does slow down the opponent quite a bit whenever you can snipe their queen. A couple of Banelings over here. Will they get spotted? No, it doesn't look like it. Okay. Serral going for a delayed Evo chamber of his own. But as long as you can hold the attack here from the opponent, you're, yeah, in a good spot. So that's the main thing. You need to figure out, okay, exactly what is my opponent doing. Couple of Banelings over here blowing up. Still, though, all of these little skirmishes have already allowed Serral at a small income advantage, as it's 47 versus 42. And if it's up to him, he's going to kill a couple more drones. There you go, 3 more going down. Now we have a 10-worker lead right here for Serral, which is huge. It really does add up over time, yeah. Immediately, he's going to start skyrocketing ahead right there. Couple of Zerglings going around. RagnaroK, though, going for that +1 carapace push. Now, I love this little move right here. RagnaroK transferring a couple drones from the natural towards the third base. Serral right now sends a couple of links over at the third base as well. He's counting the workers and he sees, okay, this seems relatively okay. Here's the attack coming in, though, for RagnaroK. He doesn't have carapace yet, so yeah, the roaches are not really in the big enough numbers yet for him to go for the attack. Serral at a 15-worker advantage. All he needs to do is make a large enough army to prevent that army from RagnaroK absolutely trashing his. Zerglings, once again, ready to go in. They're scouting around wherever they can. He doesn't see too much. He sees the worker count at the third base. Serral needs to be careful. He has been droning here for a while, but he's trying to compare his worker count to his opponent's. And he's like, okay, if my opponent has about a dozen workers at the third, I can probably have a dozen plus like 5. So that's exactly what he's done over here. Continuously scouting, trying his best to figure out exactly how much he needs. 20 worker advantage right now for Serral. So income-wise, this game is in the bag as long as he manages to hold this attack right now that is coming out of RagnaroK. Serral's scouting as well. He's got a lair. Obviously, he doesn't have that many units available compared to his opponent yet. But as long as he keeps making army, now a couple Banelings rolling in as well, trying to just deal damage wherever they can. I mean, he is in a dominating lead right now. RagnaroK, though, ready to go for his +1 carapace push. He decides to go for an attack over here. Zerglings do manage to connect right now on a couple of those links. But there is so much economy right here for Serral on the back of it. He is, well, squeezing out 10, 13 roaches right there all in one go. And this is where something remarkable happens in this series. Serral believes at this point, because he has been scouting so proactively, that he has been played like a fool, and that he is going up against an opponent who's got a similar economy to his, and he decides to tap out. I think that if Serral decided to stick in his game for another 2 minutes, he would have won. His upgrade is going to finish up momentarily. He's got a 22 worker advantage here. And even if he loses basically the entire worker line at the third base, he's still in a playable position. Now, obviously that would not be great, but I don't think we would ever arrive at that situation. He has been injecting his bases properly. He still has 5 larvae available as well. He's got 9 roaches about to pop. He's got a spine crawler here at the third base too. Yes, there's a lot of reinforcements coming across, but these are all Zerglings. Serral decides to tap out because he, well, scouted so actively on the other side of the map and he thought, okay, my opponent's economy is huge. But that's because RagnaroK decided to transfer drones from the natural on over to the third base. And because of that, it's RagnaroK who moves on in the tournament to face off against Maru. Now, for what it's worth, he got absolutely smashed by Maru 3-0. But there's no denying that there's more than a $20,000 difference between, well, the quarterfinals and the semifinals. I really think Serral regrets this decision quite a bit. Anyways, I hope you enjoyed watching this video. If you enjoyed it, please take the 1 second that it takes to hit the like button down below and let me know your thoughts down below in the comment section as well. Curious to hear them. For now though, have a great rest of your day. Don't forget to smile, and I'll see you once again in the next one.